I'd like to welcome Daniel Kingsley to this expert showcase today. And thank you, Daniel, for being here. And
I'm delighted to be here, Doreen.
I'd like to introduce you first, and then I'll ask you our question. Daniel Kingsley was a barrister, and that's a UK trial attorney who became so fascinated with discovering more authentic ways of communicating and being that he devoted himself to studying these for many years. He happily gave up the law and found presence training in 2012. In this way, he was able to combine his knowledge of communication skills with the principles of authentic embodied learning. In other words, how to be at ease in yourself and in your body and to relate with others from there. Daniel's calling is to help people to reconnect with who they really are and to step forward into a world from there with confidence and to make real connections. Thank you, Daniel. Here we go. And the question I'm asking today is, what's a strategy or a best strategy? What do you bring to your work with people who have anxiety and want to be confident?
Okay, so I'm going to offer two interlinked strategies which stem from one insight. So let's start with the insight. Have you ever noticed, Doreen, that when people get upset, no matter how big or senior or how important they are, they start behaving in quite a childlike fashion?
I'll be remembering some of my moments, yes.
Yeah, I was going to, present company is included here. Present company, whoever we are, when we get upset, the part of us that gets upset is a childlike part.
Mm.
So the first insight there is there are different parts of us. We think there's one I, but there are actually lots of different bits to I. And the bit of us that gets upset is a childlike part. So that's the first part of the insight.
Mhm.
And that's for everybody, whether you are a president or a prime minister, or you're somebody who's a teacher in a school, it's the same.
Yeah.
The bit of us that gets upset is a childlike part. That part of us, that childlike part that gets upset or anxious or worried, needs to be treated as if it is a child.
Ooh.
It needs to be treated with kindness. It needs to be treated with empathy. It needs to be treated with reassurance.
Mhm.
And yet that's not how habitually we treat it. That voice in our heads says, pull yourself together, be a man, be a woman,
Mm.
ignore these feelings. And actually that part doesn't need to be ignored. That part actually just needs some reassurance, and it needs a bit of a hug, basically. No matter how big or important you are, that's what that part needs. And if we can actually learn how to treat that part as if it is a child and give it the looking after it needs, then the more adult parts of us can get on and do our jobs and do what we really want to do in the world.
Yes.
So that's the central insight that underlies the principles that I'm going to share with you.
Good. Thank you. Got it.
So the first of these principles is what I call disidentify and reassure. Disidentify and reassure. So we often say things like, I feel worried or I feel anxious,
Yes.
as if that's the whole of me. That's all there is. There's me and I am this anxiousness. I am this worriedness. And actually, disidentification is recognizing that actually it's only a part of me that is anxious. So just going from the statement, I feel anxious, to there's a part of me that feels anxious, you can already feel more space.
Yes. Got it.
So that's the first thing. What enhances that is notice where in the body you feel it. Yes, there'll be anxious thoughts. Of course, there'll be anxious thoughts, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But where in the body do you feel the anxiety? Usually lower than your neck. Usually often somewhere in your diaphragm or in your belly, there'll be an anxious part. A knot in your belly, or butterflies in your tummy, or tightness in your diaphragm, or something. Yeah.
Heart.
Yeah. The heart going. There'll be various places, like, where do you feel it in your body? And then what does that feel like? So we're switching from an attitude of being concerned about it to an attitude of curiosity towards it. Okay, well, it's about yay big and it feels fluttery or it feels tight or it feels like this. So we're getting a little bit more distant from it. So we're going from I feel worried to a part of me is worried and like, where is it? What does it feel like? And then we're offering that part some empathy and some reassurance. Empathy, it's like, yeah, I can really hear you're feeling worried. And validation, I can really understand why you're feeling worried because this talk we're about to give is a big deal, you know. And then once you've empathized and reassured that, empathized and validated that part to show you understand why it's feeling worried, then you can offer it the adult part of you can offer it some reassurance. It's like, yeah, and we're going to be okay. We've done our homework here. We've done our practice. It doesn't need to be perfect. So we're giving it realistic reassurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And this is a
I like that word,
yeah,
realistic reassurance. You know, like put it
yeah.
in context.
Yeah, we don't need to tell that part, it's going to be incredible, it's going to be amazing, you're going to smash it out of the park, because that part may or may not believe that. But if you say to it, look, we've done our homework, it's at least going to be okay. That's all that part needs to hear. What that part needs to hear is it's going to be okay. So that's the first part of the principle I teach. So disidentify, go from I feel scared, I feel anxious, to a part of me feels anxious. Then empathize and validate it, and then you can offer it some reassurance. It's like taking this part of you and just, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And actually, really, it's not about the words. It's about the feeling of reassurance, reassuring that part it's going to be okay, because that's actually what it needs to hear in order to calm down. And then the adult part of you can take over and can run the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this reassurance in terms of embracing the one, you know, like self-soothing, I guess is what.
Self-soothing, yeah, this is an operational means of doing self-soothing. And if it's tricky for you to do that, you can actually imagine doing that for your child or a friend's child, just to get those juices flowing of just sort of being able to reassure, because we could do it for somebody else really easily, and then we just turn that light inwards towards ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you find it difficult to give yourself that reassurance, imagine giving that reassurance to somebody else, because you could easily give that reassurance to somebody else. And then once that's flowing, you can turn that reassurance inwards towards yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea of giving it to somebody else and saying to yourself, I wouldn't say that to somebody else. It's like, why? Why do people treat themselves that way? How does that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's a whole nother story, which is an interesting story. We can talk
Right.
about that another time. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot to say about that. But I won't talk. I won't tell you about that today. I'll just tease you and let you know that I've got some very interesting stuff to say about that. But
And,
what I am going to offer you is a second complementary technique that goes with that.
okay.
And that technique comes with another insight. The insight is that thoughts, worried or anxious thoughts, they're like trains. They just keep coming into the station.
Yes.
And at some level, there's very little we can do to stop the trains coming into the station. They're just gonna come into the station. There are some body-based techniques I teach people to have less thoughts coming into the station. I'm not going to teach you those today, but there is nothing you can do to stop the thoughts coming into the station completely. Trains are just going to keep coming into your station. So that's the bad news. The good news is that they are slow-moving American goods trains, like in the movies. So if you've hopped onto one of these trains of worrying, these trains of thought of worrying, you can deliberately hop off again, using a technique I call awareness acceptance choice, AAC.
Mm-hmm.
So you notice you're having a thought worrying about, oh, I wonder whether it's going to be okay. I wonder whether I'm going to get the job. I wonder whether they're going to like me. If you're speaking in front of an audience, I wonder whether they're liking me right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the awareness part. Acceptance, it's okay. It's okay that I'm worried. It's okay that I'm worried. And you can tell that you can see how this links to the previous part. It's a bit like the validation part. It's okay that I'm worried. It's natural that I would be worried in that situation. So instead of worrying about worrying, we actually empathize and validate the fact that we're worrying. Yeah. And it's okay that I'm worrying, because otherwise we're worried about worrying. You don't want that. You just have a vicious circle on that one. So the first part is awareness. Yeah, I'm worrying about whatever it is. Acceptance, it's okay that I'm worrying. So it needs to be warm, reassuring acceptance. It's not like, yeah, it's okay that I'm worried. It's like, it's okay. It's really, really okay. So we're giving ourselves that reassurance that it's okay to be worrying. We often get concerned that if we actually acknowledge the worry, it will take over, but it's the other way around. If we actually acknowledge the worry with warmth, it doesn't take over. Even if it doesn't go away, it doesn't take over.
Mm-hmm.
Choice, well, there are lots of good choices to make here, and depending on your situation, you'll make different choices. So the first choice is always the same. Get off that train.
Mm-hmm.
Just let go of that worrying. Let go of that worry in that moment. Yes, another train may come into the station. You may start a new worry, or you may worry about the same thing, but just in this moment, get off the train. Let go of worrying about whatever it is where you're worrying about. That's the first part. But the mind doesn't do negative commands that well. You've got to tell it, don't do this and do that instead.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give the mind something else to do. So it's let go of that worrying thought, and, well, there are lots of good things to do here. The first one is the one we've already discussed. Give yourself some reassurance. Give that part of you that's worrying a hug, some warmth, some reassurance. Let it know it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in front of an audience, you can assume support. You can assume that even though the audience have got blank faces, you can assume that they probably are interested in what you've got to say. So it's like the adult part of you saying to that childlike part of you, yes, I know they've got blank faces. I know they're not giving you the feedback right now, but they're probably interested. And of course, we know this is true. Empirically speaking, most members of most audiences are interested most of the time. So the adult part can reassure the child part, yes, they're not giving you the feedback you want, but they're probably interested. And another good choice is to feel your body, feel your bottom on the seat, feel your feet on the floor, feel your back against the back of the chair. So our grandmas used to have a phrase, which is the devil makes work for idle hands. In other words, if your mind is left to its own devices, it will go off and worry. So give it something else to do. Give it the task of feeling your contact with the chair and the floor.
Yes, that's being in the moment. It sounds like presence, and that feels like a really wonderful message. I get that awareness and acceptance, what you talked about, disidentification is the awareness, and acceptance is the soothing. And oh, Daniel, thank you. This is, I think this is so clear. I think it's going
Yeah.
to be
So,
very easy for people who are listening to understand. And it's, yeah, what you said is just those three those three ideas is
yeah.
all it takes.
All
Hello.
it takes, awareness, acceptance, choice. Awareness, I'm worrying about that. Acceptance, that's okay. Choice, get off the train, give yourself some reassurance, come back to feeling your body.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
My very, very great pleasure.
Yes.